Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to address the Liberal government's latest budget proposal, a budget that fails Canadians on affordability, jobs, housing, and immigration. Now, I'm going to start with the good news first, because there isn't much. The PV Mart in Spruce Grove has now reopened, and folks are really excited. After 10 years, but now we're into the bad news. After 10 years of deficits, Canada's finances are in a troubling shape. This budget adds $321.7 billion to the federal debt over the next 5 years. That's more than twice what the Prime Minister previously projected. And that works out to over $10 million in new debt each and every hour. Now, this huge deficit comes on top of a number of very important cuts that this government is also making. This Liberal government likes to talk about all their spending and their generosity, but I think it should be pointed out that they're making some significant cuts to areas of importance. They're removing statutory protections for free postage for blind people who are accessing literature products that weigh more than regular literature products. These statutory protections are being removed. I wonder why the government would be removing accessibility supports for blind people. My grandfather was blind and he utilized those services, and I think it's very concerning. I also received a very concerning letter from a constituent, Nicole Callahoo, who serves as the Education Director for the Paul First Nation. I just want to read a few excerpts from her letter to me. We're writing today with a heavy heart and a deep sense of urgency. Despite submitting full Jordan's Principle applications and following every step as required, our school has not received the necessary funding to continue services for our students. We are now in the 4th month of the school year, and these delays contradict both the spirit and the purpose of Jordan's Principle. For those who don't know, Jordan's Principle is a principle which requires the federal government to provide funding for at-risk Indigenous students. I further quote, "In the true way of our ancestors, we did not wait for approvals before taking care of our children. We honored their needs and began services immediately so that they would not experience further hardship or delay. These supports have brought powerful changes. Students who were once quiet and unsure have begun to speak for the first time. Those who carried worry and heaviness have started to open their hearts. They look forward to their sessions. Families have shared that they notice a new calmness, confidence, and connection in their children. These are not small steps. They are the beginnings of healing. However, because the funding from the federal government remains outstanding, we now face the painful reality of stopping these services. Ending supports after children have finally begun to trust and feel safe goes against our cultural teachings and against everything that Jordan's Principle stands for. Interrupting care will undo progress, break relationships, and cause harm that could have been prevented. This type of disruption echoes the very history that Jordan's Principle was created to stop. Jordan's Principle exists so that no First Nations child is caught in delay, conflict, or confusion. It is rooted in a teaching that the child comes first, before government processes, before jurisdictional disagreements, and before paperwork. Yet the current delays and the refusals to fund are causing harm to our students, harm that carries emotional, educational, and cultural consequences. I just wanted to share that from Nicole Callahoo, the Education Director of Paul First Nation. We stand up and listen in this House every day as these Liberals talk about reconciliation and talk about their big new programs to support children, and yet children, Indigenous children, First Nations children in my region are suffering because of this government's failures to support them. Failures that violate treaties, failures that violate court rulings, and it's a shame. And yet, despite this government's cold-hearted cuts, our national debt now stands at $1.3 trillion, and taxpayers are now paying $55 billion just in interest payments every year. That's more than the Canada Health Transfer, and it's more than all the GST collected. It's over $3,000 per household. Meanwhile, GDP growth is stuck, and unemployment is expected to average over 6% over the next 5 years. These recent job numbers we received are painting a troubling picture. While we're seeing part-time jobs replacing high-paying, family-supporting, full-time jobs. We cannot run an economy and we cannot support families based on part-time employment. The gig economy is not a strategy for success, and yet these Liberals seem to stand up here and celebrate it every day. The Prime Minister promised to balance the operating budget within 3 years to ensure that there was a declining deficit to GDP ratio. and a declining debt-to-GDP ratio. However, the parliamentary budget officer says that there's very little chance of meeting this. Fitch Ratings is warning that this budget weakens Canada's credit profile. What happens when our credit profile goes down? Our interest rates to borrow go up, which means that more and more of our tax dollars goes to servicing our debt instead of going to essential programs like supporting Jordan's Principle, like supporting literature for the blind and supporting all the other programs that people depend on the government. You know, it's not just Conservatives saying this. Dan Kelly, the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, called the budget a missed opportunity to provide meaningful relief to Canada's employers. Conservatives are proposing amendments to scrap hidden taxes on food, work, home building, investment and energy, and to cap the deficits. This government rejected these ideas and instead has added new spending. This isn't responsible budgeting, it's reckless, and it's hurting the vulnerable people in Canada the most. The results of this Liberals' poor economic management is higher inflation, higher interest rates, and higher costs for Canadians. We just read a report that this coming year, Canadians can expect to pay $1,000 more. A family of four paying $1,000 more just for groceries. And Statistics Canada confirms that the prices for food, gas, and rent continue to rise. Now, some might call this a global phenomenon, but it's rising far faster than our closest neighbor and trading partner, the United States. Food inflation is nearly double the Bank of Canada's target rate and rising 48% faster than in the United States. Between March and September 2025 alone, strawberries rose 25%, beef by 20%, ground coffee by 20%, and chicken drumsticks by 17%. A decade ago, when Conservatives were in government, individuals with a full-time job were not relying on food banks to feed themselves and their family. Now, the high cost of groceries is exacerbating the issues of food insecurity, and we have many families who are working full-time who still have to go to the food bank. It's risen by over 40% poverty in the last 2 years alone. Food Banks Canada has given the government an F for poverty and food insecurity, noting that hunger is becoming normalized in Canada. More working people, seniors, and young families are relying on food banks than ever before. Now, when we talk about housing, the Prime Minister has promised 500,000 new homes, yet that number has been significantly downgraded. Build, which is an advocacy group for home builders, actually projects that the Liberal government's home building program could cost the sector over 100,000 jobs. We've seen pre-construction sales collapse. In the GTA alone, they're down 82%. Developmental charges, which make up 25% of the cost of homes these days, have risen by 700% in 20 years. It's pricing many families out of the market. We've seen population growth under this Liberal government outpace housing supply, outpace healthcare services and educational services because of this government's failed immigration policies. Instead of aligning our immigration system with housing and service capacity, they're making these high levels permanent, keeping over 2 million temporary residents by 2027. That's a 300% increase since 2015. They have no plan for 500,000 undocumented individuals or 3 million temporary workers whose visas are now expiring. This inaction is directly straining wages, it's hurting health care, it's hurting housing availability, and it's hurting childcare. Canadians deserve an immigration system that takes into account the needs of Canadians first. That means a system aligned to the realities of our infrastructure capabilities, our health care, educational, and job market. Now, despite the Prime Minister's comments, young Canadians have already sacrificed enough. He said, you need to sacrifice more. Well, they've already sacrificed enough. Youth unemployment has climbed to over 13%, the highest since 2010. Students who are trying to balance school and work face unemployment rates of over 17%. It follows a difficult summer where many returning students faced the worst job market since the Great Recession. And those who are recently graduating are facing an extremely difficult job market and unable to find jobs in their field. Now, the Prime Minister said to them that they've got to sacrifice more. Well, we're seeing too many young people who should be buying their first home, starting a family, be in the highlight of their career, pursuing something that they love, and yet many of them are still having to live in their parents' basements because they can't afford to get a home. Many have sacrificed the dream of home ownership. They've paid the price as food costs have exploded. They've paid exorbitant taxes, delaying their ability to start family. They've sacrificed enough. This Liberal government spending-driven deficit takes money out of the pockets of every Canadian. It's making everything more expensive. Young Canadians shouldn't have to suffer. Now, Conservatives have a vision. for a future Canada where Canadians, all Canadians, can thrive, a country where hard work is rewarded, where you can start a business, build a home, develop our resources.
I'm afraid the member has run out of time. Questions and comments. The member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to emphasize that going out of the election, we made a commitment to Canadians on a number of different fronts. But, I want to highlight some very good news that came out today. We have now had 3 months in a row where we've had substantial job growth, Mr. Speaker. In September, 60,000 jobs were created. 28,000 of those were in the manufacturing industry. We had 67,000 jobs in October, Mr. Speaker. Vast majority of those were actually in the province of Ontario. 60,000 this month, or I should say in November. That is significant growth. Does the member not agree that jobs matter and is a great indicator in terms of how...
Okay, thank you. And the member for Parkland, his old name comes to mind, but Parkland, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jobs are important. And I want to remind that member of a few names that he might not know about. Crofton, 1,000 jobs lost. Brampton, 3,000 jobs lost. Algoma Steel, over 400 jobs lost. Sawmill towns across Western Canada, particularly in British Columbia, thousands of jobs lost. These communities have been gutted, and this government has absolutely failed. And what I would remind that member is that when you look at the job numbers, we're talking about part-time jobs. This government is creating a gig economy. And a gig economy is not a strategy for families that can buy homes, families that can support a growing family, families that can support.
Okay, thank you. The member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government over the last 10 years has arguably the worst economic record since 1945. Here's just one set of data points. Overall Liberal productivity has declined in each and every of the last 4 years. I can't think of any 4-year period since 1945 where this has happened. It's in CANSIM Table 3830033. Productivity was $65 per hour in 2021, $64.60 in 2022, $63.50 in 2023, $63.20 in 2024 last year. It has dropped in each and every of the last 4 years since 2020. That's why the Bank of Canada has called it an emergency. The budget does little to address this productivity emergency. Would the member comment?
The member for Parkland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague, for providing this great data for the House of Commons to review, because I think for many Canadians these numbers might seem like they're abstract, but let me talk to you about how important it is that when Canada has the worst productivity growth in the last 4 years, what does that mean? It means that we're not creating jobs in this country. It means that we're not raising wages in this country. It means that we're not creating the economic growth in this country that can sustain our healthcare system and our social safety net. And under the last 4 years of this failed Liberal government, our productivity has been in the gutter. And the Bank of Canada is sounding the alarm, and this Liberal budget does very little to address our productivity crisis. Thank you.
The member for Courtenay Alberni.
Speaker, it's critical we plug economic leakages right now. In 2010, the Conservatives scrapped the 25% tariff on foreign-built ferries, claiming Canadian shipyards couldn't compete, and the Liberals made that mistake permanent in 2016. Since then, ferry contracts and good jobs have gone overseas, while communities like Port Alberni on Vancouver Island lack the dry dock capacity for shipbuilding, maintenance, repair, and recycling. Reinstating this tariff would level the playing field and generate revenue to build that capacity here at home. Does my colleague agree that the government should reverse this mistake and reinstate the tariff to support Canadian workers and Canadian shipyards?
The member for Parkland.
Well, I find it very interesting, when I see a member, my honourable colleague from the NDP, calling for a return to tariffs. And I can say that in my personal opinion, I don't want to see tariffs. I want to see a country where businesses want to come here and thrive because we've got good regulations, we've got a responsible tax rate that drives investment into our country, where we have a strong, educated, and skilled workforce that is able to provide the productivity gains needed to bring that investment and those jobs into our country. I think that when we're talking about bringing things like tariffs in, we're providing a crutch for the economy, which makes it so it's more difficult to get those needed investments and reforms to ensure that we can have the strong jobs that we need for the future economy. Thank you, Mr.